All right, welcome everyone for joining. So I know it's a crazy time out there right now, so we're doing this webinar kind of, we wanted to rush this one out there for everybody to be a part of and to listen to as of ways that you can use Workamajig in terms of working remotely from different locations, you know, your houses, offices, if anybody's still there, but really kind of get into this, the deeper levels of the system that will provide this level of communication. Along those lines, so we're going to start with some settings. I'm then going to go through a couple of demonstrations of typical ways you can use the system currently, plus a little bit more of advanced ways you can use the system beyond that. So I do have my whole screen being shared. So you're going to see me kind of moving in between two different browsers here because I'm logged in as two different people. So I want to kind of try to show you what the conversations can look like kind of back and forth between you and your users. We also have a chat that we can kind of pose questions in. I'll come back to this chat panel later on and answer any questions that come about. But please just use the chat. Don't use the QA kind of room or anything like that. I know there's some other features in this webinar tool, but it's a little bit too much for me to manage. I can just manage the chat there. If you don't have that chat accessible, it should be from your Zoom webinar toolbar under more like chat. Should be somewhere over there. But anyway, if you have any questions after this call as well, feel free to email support@workamajig.com. That email address is always available. Your emails get directed to your account manager, who will then respond to you back as soon as possible. All right, well, I'm glad everybody is here. I hope everybody is safe and everybody is healthy. So let's go ahead and get started. So here I am logged in as Ron Burgundy, who's an administrator of this account. And where we're starting off is system setup. Now, as a quick reminder, where system setup resides is if you have the access to get there, it would be the Workamajig menu, admin manager, system setup. So from within system setup, where I went to start today's discussion is transaction preferences. So this houses a lot of the settings that how the system works overall. The one we want to focus on in here is notification options. The reason why I'm going here is this is where we've actually added some new things as of a few updates ago. So you'll notice that you can actually have conversations be now a system message. Now I've just checked both for everything. So that way, any email that I get basically gets sent to my email address, plus anything that's tagged specifically in one of these notifications can also show up on my notification bell. So as a quick example of that, because I have conversations, for example, being sent as system messages, where that now goes is actually in my notification bell. So my notification bell, I can see, oh, messages. And there's a message I got from another user. This is just showing me this is the email that the system has sent me. Now there may be other emails or past emails that you've already cleared out. So you can actually go to search for past emails and notifications and just click search and maybe go through a specific date range. But this is going to show you all the emails the system has sent you over time. So you can always go back and open up an old email and say, oh, I had a, let's see, there's a round on this deliverable, for example. Oh, cool. I can go here and, go back and review it if I needed to. So there's some neat ways to kind of access, old email notifications without having to actually go to your email inbox. You can just get them through here as long as you have all that kind of set up to be sending to, both your, email and as a system message. So that's kind of a new thing that we have here. So that's something to kind of definitely investigate and maybe turn on in this day and age that we have right now. I prefer both because that way I get to my email and my system message. Now, of course, email, that means your employee or contact record needs to have an email address to get these emails. But system message means anybody that can log in would see it as a system message in their notification bell. So those are just the messages and notifications and whatnot. Now, if you want to interact with email further, so you do want the email to go to your inbox, for example, and you want to be able to then reply by email. For example, maybe you're not able to log into Workamajig for the moment for whatever reason, or you're on your cell phone, who knows? So actually what you can also do is to take the email portion further, is go into your connections from system setup. Under connections, the first option here is emails. And so you can set up a kind of a reply to email address through here under the incoming emails section. Now there's some, verbiage here. Don't use your personal, inbox for this. It's always hard to explain what this is really regarding. But what this is this is a single stream email inbox that will read all emails that people reply to and thread them back into Workamajig. And then Workamajig will see who is part of that discussion, that conversation, and email back out to them. So this way, you just need to email back to Workamajig when this is set up. You don't have to reply back to the individual users. Workamajig will handle that based on the setup of that conversation. So this is a really neat feature for a lot of different reasons, but this is one that could be integrated further to, take email to the next level, within your system. So what that means is that somebody could create a conversation here on a task card and email, let's say the account manager or whoever, and that person could reply by email. That email is read by this account. That email then gets threaded back into the conversation of this task and then notifies the creative or whoever else was part of that conversation. And then of course they can continue on replying and threading and so on and so on. So that's really just the neat thing. Incoming emails is definitely a cool feature. Outbound emails, what you would want to do then is if you set this up as we would recommend, you'd want to take whatever email address is your incoming email address and then make that the outgoing email address and then force that system email. That way it kind of gets around some email systems that can kind of like flag for spam and things like that. This tries to get around that by matching the reply address to the sender's address. So it's definitely good to have both of those kind of matching in that respect. Now, you may need to speak with your IT person if you have needs that go beyond that, because you want to speak with your IT person about setting up POP or IMAP access to that account. Plus, if you need to, just use create a brand new Gmail account to do this kind of outside of the system and outside of your email system as well, if you need to. So definitely some options and choices there. But again, if you have questions, feel free to search our support guide on things like this, incoming emails. That is support.workamajig.com. That is our guides, and you'll be able to find that kind of information of setup and workflow. Plus, you can just email us if you have questions on that too. Okay, so that's some of the system setup side of this information. Now, how does it kind of play out? So what I have here is an example of, let me go to my first tab here. I have a project schedule. So again, here I'm on my Ron Burgundy. Let's pretend I'm like the account manager or account exec per se, or project manager, who knows. But here I have my project open. I have my schedule open. Let's say our current task is this client revisions task. Imagine everything else before it's done. We're now getting some client revisions in. So on this specific task, you can actually, not only can you edit the details of that task of who's assigned and the dates and all that, you have all that information as well, but I can jump over and I can actually start a conversation right here from the project schedule. So I can say, okay, who's on this task? I want them to know, here's something that the client said. So I might start a conversation and I'll say client feedback. I could spell it right today, that'd be nice. Client feedback. And they said this, that, and more. So this is the client's feedback, for example. Now notice there's this email to list. I know there's a lot of fake emails, fake names in this test site of mine, but the main point here is to note that whoever is on this email to list is going to get an email, or at least get a system message, if nothing else. And then I can kind of customize this. Now this email to list does pull from the project team. We do actually have an enhancement that I think is going out in a month or two, where you can have it where it just adds whoever's on the task to the email to list when you're doing a conversation like this. So look for that in a future update. But for now, it still pulls from the project team. And so you can kind of customize it and say, okay, well, only that one person is involved. So that's all that I really want to bring in there. So let me make sure that they're on there because I added them last minute. So I'm going to look for Brian. Actually, he's on. There we go. Let me add them on there. So that way I make sure that that's who it's going to specifically. I'll kind of just remove everybody else because that's just a lot of clutter at the moment. So this is between me and my creative, Brian, up there. So I want to just give them some feedback. I'm going to go ahead and save this. That creates the conversation on that task. Plus, it also sent an email to Brian. So let me switch over to Brian now. So as an example, I can go to Brian's notification bell, and there I'll see, there's that client feedback. So I could click on that to open up the email. But note that when you click on to open it, it's going to clear it at the same time. So be mindful of that when you open it, be ready to, work with it. So what I mean by that is if I click on that, okay, there's the email, there's the note. I can see it was in regards to, this task and project. I could reply and whatnot from here. Just say, okay, reply and say, got it. So you could send a reply back that goes back to, whoever else is part of this chain. By default, the system will not email you of your own conversation. So keep that in mind. But the other person would get the email. Now notice here, we're not seeing anything change here. So let me do a little refresh. And we should see on my because I just read it. Well, unfortunately, because I've already read it, we're not going to see it show up as a notification. So let me actually add one more just so you can kind of see what this looks like. And so I will go on here and let's add a reply, and I'll just say, one more thing. Let's go ahead and post my reply. Perfect. Now let me refresh, and there we go. Now we see for my creative, there's a new update. So note that these pages refresh on about a 15-minute cycle max, but there's a little refresh icon. You can click here to kind of see what has changed since then. And what's nice is when somebody else is adding a conversation to your assigned task, or if they update like a spec sheet on that project, or they add a to-do, anything that they do for the most part will show up as a new update. I just can't show you that if I'm logged in as that same person. So that's why I'm having some kind of dual screens here to show you this. But I can see there's a new update. Great. Well, let me click on my task, see what's new. Oh, there's an unread message here. Well, let me click into it. There's the unread message. Oh, one more thing. Oh, perfect. Good. I'm going to click on the unread thing, and then that way it kind of clears it out of there. And now I have no more updates. So it's kind of a neat way to kind of communicate with your creatives remotely, is you can interact through the project schedule using the conversations of each task. Now, of course, you can put conversations to the project itself, but your individual users may not get notified as easily as they were if they were assigned to their task. Now, as the creative, I can always click on my task and see what conversations have been said on that task specifically. Plus, I can say, show me all conversations for this project, which will show a lot more. Notice there's an unread one here, and that one's not notifying me because it wasn't specific to my task. So that's why it's pertinent to put it to the task itself of who you want to get notified. That way it stands out a little bit further for them. All right, let me move on through here a little bit more. Of course, if I were to add a conversation from the creative side, sure, that'll show up over here that somebody else started a conversation on here as well from the project side. So your project managers could see what they've submitted and sent back and forth. Plus, me as the project manager would be able to see what their reply was also through my notification bell. So I'd be able to see, oh, there's their reply to their feedback. Lots of little things I can kind of utilize here in terms of the message center, just being up to date of all the emails. Plus, you might want to just go through this from periodically throughout the day and just double check. Okay, let me just click on that. Does that look good? Click on that. Is that good? Okay, and then you can just clear all when you're done. But those are just some of the ways that you can kind of interact through the project schedules. Now let's have the discussion of, well, what if we want to discuss things that are outside of a project? I want to have a conversation with someone specifically, but it's not necessarily project related. And in that case, what we could utilize is our Today pages. So let's say I'm a Today project manager. On this page, we have conversations. So most of you probably look at the daily feed, but you might start gravitating towards this conversations tab here with everything going on as a way to kind of communicate remotely. So that way, if you have a message to send somebody else beyond that's not necessarily a task or project related, you can do that through these conversation panels here. So if I want to start a new conversation outside of a project, Then I click on the plus sign here from my top toolbar. Under everyone, I'm going to start a new conversation. And so in this conversation, what I want to do, first of all, is click on show more, because now I get all these advanced options and I can say this is going to be assigned to, and this is saying who do you want, whose today page do you want us to show up on? Well, I want this to show up on Brian's. So let me select Brian Fantana. Notice as soon as I assign to somebody else, this is no longer completed. So now I can start putting in my message. So I could say, talk about, let's talk about your overtime. How much, OT was last week. So put in some info, asking a question. And when I'm creating a conversation like this, I don't have to attach it to a project. I have the option of putting it to a project, sure. But note that when you're creating a conversation in this way, by default, this conversation is called what we called like a sales activity. Now you can change that once you have it created and you're trying to do different things. But ultimately, what this is saying is I want to create a conversation that is outside of the project. This is just something between me and Brian, and I want that to be kind of my thing. So let me make sure I get Brian on here as well. So we'll make sure that this is only between me and Brian, have it all set up, and let me go ahead and save this. And that creates the conversation. So this conversation is currently not part of a project. And what that means is Brian would be able to go to the conversations tab of this today page. Now we don't have a refresh button on that conversations panel itself, but we can see, after about 15 minutes, this would have refreshed, and we can see, oh, hey, there's a conversation somebody has about, let's talk about your overtime today. How much overtime did you have last week? Okay, great. Well, let me click on that. I'm going to go ahead and reply back. And how you do that is you just click on the 0 replies, add a reply, and you might say, okay, I had 10 hours of overtime. So let's just save that real quick as a reply. And we're kind of done with that at the moment. But that just kind of then opens up the email kind of communication back and forth that your other user could then see, okay, what was our overtime? So you can kind of click through and see what the responses were. But at the very least, now there's an action item on this user's desktop. Sure, let's talk about our OT. You replied, maybe, okay, I've replied, so I'm going to go ahead and just complete it and just say save. I'm done. I don't need to see that anymore. And that will clear out your conversations. Now, the thing to note is when you're in the conversations tab of a today page, the very first sub-tab here is projects. And this is going to show you all conversations across all projects that you're on the team of. So this doesn't mean it's relating to you. This is just kind of a catch-all, if you will, this projects tab. So some of you might click on this and see hundreds or thousands of conversations that are just been piling up here because maybe you never used this. Just click mark everything as read and then just move on going forward. But that way you can just be alerted of, hey, there was a conversation on a project I'm a part of. That way, nothing kind of really gets missed, if you will. There's an opportunity for you to see it. Even if it wasn't for your task, at least it was a conversation on your project. Well, that's definitely a way to kind of see broader conversations. Plus, if you just want to see ones that are being assigned to you outside of projects, you can utilize any of these tabs. They should be intuitive enough for what they are referring to. And then kind of go back and forth that way. Now over here, back on my manager, I was sent from one of my users, what's my login? Well, of course, I would say they should know what their login is if they were able to log in and send me this conversation. But, sure, this is just an example. So they could reply back with any kind of question they may have. But the conversations here, just kind of play around with it. Let me edit this conversation further. So here's this type of conversation. So notice it says sales activity. So whenever you initiate a conversation outside of a project like this, it creates it as what we call a sales activity. And note that if it's a sales activity and you link it to a project, it's not actually going to show up in the project conversations. So that's one thing to kind of keep in mind. Now, there is a system setting we can change, so that way all sales conversations for a project are searchable within the project. But to just kind of, say, you know what, this is something that I want to be shown in the project, plus I want to email and kind of have it outside the project, well, then you can make it a project conversation at that point. So it's all about kind of doing some manual adjustments of how you want this to kind of work. Now, there's also project to-dos. So to-dos are really conversations behind the scenes, but that's a whole different thing that I don't think we're really going to get into today. The big part is just knowing that creating conversations in this way outside of a project by default are just outside the project and are just going to show up on whoever's page they're assigned to. Okay. I think that should be good for that, but definitely this is a great way to just put action items that are, again, not project related onto someone's Today page. Next, and probably the last thing we'll talk before we open up to some questions here is deliverables. So knowing that we have, our conversations on projects, probably all familiar with that. We can also have conversations within a deliverable. So if we have, let's say on this project, I go to my deliverables, we have our this is just an example, but a YouTube link. I go to the comments panel of this deliverable. Whoever is a decision maker obviously can make a decision, but they can also share some comments. And so they may say, looks good. You can always add comments into your deliverables, and other people can see them and make comments as well. Plus, they are able to reply to your comments, so you can see other people's comments in response to yours. So you do have the ability to kind of have a communication thread within that deliverable as well. Now, there are ways, of course, to have these emails or these comments be emailed to everybody and do different things. So there are different ways to configure how deliverables work and commenting and emails work. But for the most part, we like to just have the conversations within here until the decision is made. But that's just still where you can have some kind of back and forth. So for example, me as the creative, I'm going to go back in there. I can see my deliverables that I'm set for reviewing as well. I can click on that. I can see what comments other people have made. Again, I could reply back to them as well. Say, I agree. You can utilize those comments as ways to have all of those kind of things work together, and everybody kind of be on the same page of, what they're seeing, what they're commenting on, and everyone can be a part of that. That way you can see, see the same comments on both sides. Now, I know I'm doing a little bit of refreshing just to kind of make this a little bit faster for today's webinar, but at the same time, some of these things will just show up either when you load the page. Other pages, like the Today pages, load every 15 minutes. And I believe we're kind of working on that down the road to make the more push notifications be a little bit more dynamic. But I know that's a kind of a larger scale item at the moment. So for now, hopefully this is good enough to kind of keep you going and different ways to, again, communicate and collaborate within the system. And I will open it up to questions now. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my chat box here, and let's see what everybody has been saying. Let's see, Connie, would you mind showing us how we add emails and projects we have set up? I'm not sure what you mean by showing how you set up emails. So emails are set up in your employee record. So for example, let's go in Admin Manager. I'm going to go to my employees. And by the way, I hold the control key on my keyboard to open up other screens into new pages. So that way you're not having to override the page you're on every time. So you can hold the control key on your keyboard and mouse click as a quick little shortcut, in case you didn't know that. All right, so while we're here in your employee records, so we have the creative I was kind of interacting with. We have our employee record, and in just the employee details, we can just add an email address. So make sure that everybody has an email address, and make sure it's correct, of course, as well. I will say some of my clients, they'll have stricter email guidelines. So sometimes emails from Workamajig may seem like spam. So we do have like IP addresses your IT people could whitelist. Just email support if you need to get those IP addresses from us, and we can help you out with that. Let's see. Hopefully that answers your email or your question there, Connie. Next one from Keely. Can you assign conversations to multiple people? Yes, definitely. So really a conversation, let me try to back that up a little bit. So if we're creating a conversation, let's get to my projects here. So my project back up. Let's get to my projects that I'm looking at. So if we're creating on a project, for example, if we're creating a conversation on a project, I just choose from my email to list. So conversations on projects do not get assigned to anyone specifically. They're just emailed out to whoever you choose. By default, it's whoever's selected on the team of the project. But project conversations are specifically just emailed back and forth. It's not until you start creating conversations outside of a project conversation. So if I just create a new conversation outside of a project, well, sure, I can still utilize the email back and forth and everybody can be involved, but I can only assign the conversation to one specific person. So again, this is where if you need to create an action item for somebody outside of a project, then that's when you want to assign it to that person. And that's going to show up on their conversations of their today page. Okay, but you can still involve 50 people if you want, and they can all email back and forth, and that'll just keep adding into the replies to this conversation. All right, hopefully that helps to clarify that. Let's see, Michelle, can you do a webinar on deliverables? Start from the basics. Well, we've done many deliverable webinars already. If you want, you can definitely expand your knowledge of that. Let's go to our support guide. So I'm going to go to support.workamajig.com. And if you want to see deliverables that go really into a deeper dive of deliverables, go to our video and webinars section, go to our webinars, and then look at the past webinars. So here's where we're going to see past webinars. And for example, just the other week, we did advanced deliverables. And so you can actually click on and download or watch that recording specifically. All right, let's see. Can we add more than one project number to an email when emailing outside the conversations? Actually, yes. So let's get into that conversation. So once you have that conversation made, correct. I could have a conversation that's relating to a project, if you will. So let's just call this our test for multiple. It's been a while since I've done this, but let me, I might have to actually create it first before I can attach more projects. Let me try to remember here. Good question though. We get this a lot of, we want to see, okay, we have a conversation for this project, but we want to attach it to other projects. So let me just see if I have it for, because we should see another connections plus sign over here on the right hand side, but I am not seeing it at the moment. So I might have to save this first. There we go. So once it's saved, then I can click on the connections that are over here and edit that. And I can say, let me add additional links. So I'll click the plus sign and say, let's link it to this project. So it's going to be, oh, I got to search the entity type. So we want to search projects. Then I can search for my Acme projects, add that one, insert a row. Okay, another project. And let me find another list of my projects. So that way I can have this be, not only have that be the main project, and it also show up in the project conversations if we choose it to, but it'll at least be linked to that one plus additional projects as well. So the trick though, of course, is you got to create the conversation first, then you can edit the conversations and add additional links from there. All right, great question there. Let's see, where did I leave off at? Michelle, also confirming that the 15-minute refresh is problematic. Oh, okay. Yeah, just send us your feedback on that, and we know we're trying to do, like I said, I know we're kind of having, hopefully in the pipeline, some more push notifications that could refresh things like that more quicker. But right now, 15-minute is the refresh on Today Pages. Julia, if clients want to put projects on hold or push them 3 weeks out, is there a simple way to do that? I mean, that's not necessarily a part of the conversation today. But if project, if a client wants to put a project on hold, I would just say use the on hold project status. That way it's not active. It stops the schedule from moving, and it falls off everyone's screen. So it's not active anymore by default anyway. So that's how I would manage that. But then of course you would need to know to put it back into an active status once it's ready to be worked on again. But if you have questions on putting projects on hold and whatnot, feel free to email support at workamajig.com for more suggestions or ideas. Let's see, Catherine, would you mind going over one more time how to set up the email and transaction preferences so that when we email from Outlook, whatever, to a conversation thread, it goes into Workamajig. When we reply, yeah, so let me go over that whole thing. Great question. So let's review that one more time. So knowing that we have all these email features and whatnot. So the main point here is that if we want to be able to reply by email, meaning somebody creates a conversation, somebody does something in Workamajig, it emails me, I want to reply back by email. And I want that email to go back into the threaded conversation. Then that means we want to get the incoming emails feature set up. So let's actually jump into our support guide one more time. So in our support guide, you could type in email as your search and look for like project conversations email setup. I know it could be a little bit more simplified of just saying incoming email, but once we're here, you can kind of scroll through this, and this has all the setup functions and workflow that you might be looking for. And it talks about the incoming emails, what to set up, what not to set up, especially. But basically, let's go back into my site here. And so I have my, actually our connections. So from system setup, we'll go to connections, emails. We have our incoming emails. So again, here's where you want to set up a brand new standalone email account that just facilitates the purpose of bringing emails into Workamajig. So this way you just create an, whatever your incoming email address may be, conversations@mycompany.com. You might create a new email address called that. So that way it's clear what that email address is for, because you don't want to use anyone's personal email address unless you want all your emails in Workamajig for everybody to see and it be deleted from your inbox. So basically that's what this does. So this reads the inbox of the email account you set up here. It sucks those emails into Workamajig and deletes them from the inbox of that email account and then just waits for the next one. So the trick here then is saying, well, the incoming email address is conversations@mycompany.com. Well, let me make the outbound email the same. System email should be conversations@mycompany.com. And let's make sure we force that. So that way the sender's email address matches the reply to address. So that's the big key right there, is to try to get around some of those email spam filters that a lot of email systems have now, is to try to do that. If you're still not getting emails after setting this up, you will want to speak to your IT person and see about either whitelisting that incoming email address or whitelisting our email servers, again, which you could email support@workamajig.com to get those IP addresses. So that's kind of the setup of the incoming emails, which is that reply to function. But if you do that or don't do that, I would still also suggest going to your transaction preferences, go to your notification options, and pretty much you can turn everything onto both. So if there's certain emails, because I actually have some clients where they don't like getting bombarded with emails to their email. So they may say, okay, well, daily emails, let's just make that system only. So when I log in, I can look at my system messages, which is my notification bell. Here's my messages. So maybe I just want to get notified of, overdue timesheets and things like that here. I don't want to get an email about it. Okay, well, now you can kind of choose which types of notifications you want to either go to email, system messages only, or both. For today's demonstration, I said both for everything, so you can kind of search for it in either place. Those are really a lot of those notification options that are set up now. Hopefully that helped answer that question there, Catherine. But again, if you have further questions on that setup, feel free to email support@workamajig.com with any questions or concerns there. Let's see, Danielle, similar to Julia's question about a phase of the project, is there an easy way to put, so again, you're asking more about putting projects on hold. Again, that's, what your definition of putting a project on hold may vary from what our system is default design. The default design is to have a project status called on hold, and you put it to that status, which makes it inactive. And then just kind of removes it from all the Today Creative pages. It makes it inactive so the schedule doesn't move forward, and you can't really do much else, like you can't put any transactions to it. Okay, let's see, Emma, cross-posted in Q&A. Oh, like I said, I wasn't reading the other areas, just the chat here. If I answer an email originating from Workamajig within Gmail, will my response be automatically reflected in Workamajig as continuing the conversation? Yes, as long as you have this incoming emails feature set up. So that's the key. If this isn't set up to capture those replies, then your replies will not go to Workamajig. It'll go to whoever created the email address of whoever created that conversation. So with it, like on my site here, because I don't have this set up, if I were to send out an email and a person were to reply to it, it would actually go to my personal email box because that's all that the email or conversation email had in it at that time. But if this was overridden, the email that they would receive would have my name as the sender, but the reply to and sender's email address would be the system email address. So that way, at least you can see who it's from an email perspective, but you still reply back to Workamajig. All right, moving on. Got a couple more here. We got Ashley. I'd recommend inserting a task into your schedule, set 15. Oh, okay. So I think that's, Ashley was trying to respond to the on hold. So yeah, I mean, that's definitely great if you want to kind of share ideas among yourselves. If you're not aware, we do have, let me see, that's our help site. We have what we call a community section on our help site. So if you want to, work with other of our Workamajig clients, you can go to the community section, at which point you can then log in. You have to have a valid Workamajig login to get here. Once you're here, you can, add new discussions and posts here and interact with a couple of the ones that we may create. But basically just go to your general discussion, see what other people have said, or you have some ideas. This would be a great place to discuss that. All right, let me switch back here. So last question I see here from Catherine. So the inbound and outbound emails have to both be set up and be identical in order to get the email function to work. Yes, to get it to work properly, I would highly recommend that your incoming email address and your system email match, and check force system email. If you make those different, then you're going to get weird results. So just note that the outbound is just there to kind of try to make sure that the reply to address matches the sender's address. That's really what that does. Can to-dos show up in the notification bell? Great question, actually. I know. Let me just do a little movement around here. So let's discuss that real quick and let's give that a try. So it's not going to show up, in your conversation thread per se, but to-dos would show up on your task card. So if the project manager had assigned several to-dos, you can see right off the bat there's 3 open to-dos. Now, this is an old example that's been here for a while, so I've already opened them up and read them. But if they were just added, correct, it would say there's a new update. There's 3 new updates, actually, in this case. And you would click on your task card, you go to your to-do list, and there's your to-dos. So to-dos are very similar to conversations, but they're a little bit more interactive on a task because it's kind of like a checklist of what have you completed as part of that task. So I know that goes into a little bit of a discussion there of, how should we manage tasks and whatnot. And we'll probably save that for another time. But really today's point is more for just the conversations aspect. So How do you obtain a Workamajig help login? I'm going to assume you mean through this general discussion that I was kind of showing on our support site. So if you just go to support.workamajig.com, click on the community button in the upper right corner here, and it should walk you through the steps of getting a login to access this page. Beyond that, I haven't actually done it myself because I'm always logged in as the admin here, so I don't know the what it looks like there. So I apologize on that aspect. All right, let me just double check the QA room just to be sure. Yeah, so we already did those in the chat, so that's good. I'll just dismiss those. Well, very good. So if there's any other last minute questions, please let me know at this time. I know I may not have got into great detail of deliverables, but we have plenty of deliverables trainings that can really dive deep into that for you. But I would say the big take home here is just knowing that at a system level, we can set up the connections of incoming and outgoing emails to have that reply to function. Additionally, how we want to have our transaction preferences set up for our notification options. Again, you can just go through your notification bell at that point and see, here's all the emails I've been getting. This is just based on everything we've done today. So you're going to see a lot of messages populating in here throughout the day as the system is either notifying you of something or you're on the email to list of a conversation. Plus, you can always go back and say, let me search, what did we talk about, yesterday or last month, last week? See, what did we do yesterday? Well, we got an issue with the downloading credit card connections. But you can always say, I need to find some old conversations and do some searching through there. The search, just notice it just does the subject. So the search here isn't going to search the body of the emails, just the subject. All right, looks like we had another question from Catherine. Don't be sorry for all the questions. I love them. If we use the for system email, will it change the send from address so it's all the same? Correct. So you want that, again, what you want to set up first is this incoming email account. Get that set up first. Can it log in? Can that work? Perfect. If that works, then just copy your incoming email address, for example, conversations@mycompany.com. Copy that email address and just paste it down into the system email field and then force the system email. So do that second after you figure out that or get the confirmation that it can work. But that is correct. The point of this is if I have the incoming email set up, but don't force the system email, what happens is they'll get an email from the sender and their email address, plus the reply to address will be a different address. So depending on how they reply via the email, it may go to the sender, it may go back into Workamajig. So to make sure that it goes back to Workamajig, that's why we check the for system email. So that way the sender's email address and reply to address match. Hopefully that makes sense. I know it would make sense more to like your email administrator, but if they have questions, they can definitely search our help guide or, of course, email us as well. We got another question from Jennifer. Are there security rights around who can and cannot use reply to conversations? There is not. If you're emailing it to somebody, they can reply. If you're sending a conversation, assigning it to someone, they can interact. Now, sure, there are security rights behind who can, even create a conversation in Workamajig. So there are security rights behind that level of detail. But if you're going to get an email, you can reply to it. So for example, if you have your client logins, well, better yet, they don't have a login. You just have contacts in the system with an email address. You can actually include them on a conversation. They're not a user login in Workamajig, but you can include their contact record, which emails them, and they can actually just reply and email back. So they don't even have to have a login to converse like that, which is kind of cool. Let's see, Catherine. I think my question is, will someone outside my organization see that my email address or my email address when I email out of Workamajig? So yeah, they'll see this email address, this reply to address, but we do kind of put your name. So you would have, Ron Burgundy, and the email came from, conversation@mycompanyname.com. So so at least they'll see that it came from this person, but the reply and the email address is going to be the same address, which means that if, let's say Brian up here, sent an email to the same contact, well, it's still going to have the reply address of conversations@mycompanyname.com, but it'll at least say Brian's name, in the header of the email. So we do put the name of the sender in the email, but we'll make sure that the email addresses are all back to this system email. Okay. Let's got a couple more here, and then we're going to be wrapping up soon because I want to be heading home myself here. We're all wrapping up in the office here and heading home for a couple weeks. But let's see. I think I already got that one. Okay, so from Michelle, is there a way to loop freelancers with no Workamajig account into conversations? Of course. Yeah, so you can set up a freelancer as a contact and set them up with what we call a client login. So they could actually log in for free if you want them to interact within the system, but correct. All you have to do is have at the very minimum you have to have is a contact with an email address. And then you can include them in conversations. You can even send them deliverable rounds to review because it'll send them a link they click on that only opens up that review round. So there's actually a lot you can do in terms of communication of conversations and deliverables, as so long as the contact has an email address is all you need. Now to make it simpler, what I would say is go to the project team. I'm not even sure where I'm at right now. Go to the project, go to the team. And what I would say is you want to add those contacts here. So you want to say, okay, let me look through my list of contacts and let me add that contact to the team of this project. Then that way it's easier to add them to conversations on this project. But again, they don't have to have a login, even if you add their contact to the team. You're just adding it there for the ease of use for conversations and deliverables. Okay, let's see. We got one more question here from Deborah. So that's a way of including client and email conversations. Correct. So all you need is a contact at the very least. So for example, let's see what kind of contacts I have on my wonderful test site here. So if we have a contact on here, note that you can see kind of like what projects they're a part of. If there was any conversations that were directed to them outside of a project, would also show up in this conversations area here. So you can just say, all right, hey, I need to send a conversation to Alexander. Well, I'm going to just start a conversation right from the contact record. I don't have to do it from a project. And this way I can say, let me email this contact specifically. Now, we have on this test site, okay, that's right, I just remembered. So if we want to email contacts, by default, the system doesn't allow you to email contacts. So you could allow it at a system level. There is a transaction preference to make it visible to clients by default. But if it's going to be a case-by-case basis, well, then you could say visible to client in the settings. So that way you're able to then email that contact. Without that checked, it'll just remove the contact when you're trying to email them. All right, lots of good stuff here. Show how to get to system setup. Yes, system setup is restricted. So, so correct. I kind of started off with that where, if you're an administrator, you're going to see the full menu. If you don't see this menu, then you're not an administrator and or you have less security rights. But if you're an administrator and have rights to get to system setup, that would be from the main menu, click on Admin Manager, and then go to System Setup. So that's where within System Setup, you'll see things like connections, transaction preferences, those types of things like we discussed today. All right, well, very good. So I hope this was informative. I hope this all helps everybody to kind of stay in touch, stay in communication. We would love to, see how this is playing out for everybody. So if you have concerns or you have feedback on this, please let us know. But we definitely hope this definitely works out good for everybody right now with everything going on. Let me see, Nancy has one last question here. I want to send an estimate from a project to a client and get her email approval. Is that possible? Actually, it is. So estimates, that's an interesting one. Might be a little bit beyond what we have here, but know that when you are creating an estimate on a project, let's try to go back to my project here that I had. So last question I'll kind of address here. Let's go into my project, for example, and see if we have an estimate in here. We don't. Let me just add one real quick. Let's just get that started. Okay, so when you have an estimate for a project, you have the ability of having not only an internal approver, but an external approver as well. So you can definitely say, let's go to the estimate settings here, and let's add an external approver. And that would be the contact, for example. So when you add the contact as an external approver, note that you're going to have to approve this internally first. Once that's approved, then it sends the email automatically to the external approver, the contact, and the estimate will then be stuck in the status of waiting for client approval. So it will not be approved as the budget until the client gets the email, clicks it, and approves it. But yes, you can include them in this way. There are other email systems for like invoices. You can mass email invoices to clients. You can email them a statement. There's different things you can do for emails in terms of estimate and invoicing workflows as well. The big one today, just with everything going on, was really about conversations either on projects or conversations through the Today page, just to kind of create action items and do things based on what the need is at that time. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up here then. I appreciate everyone's time today. Again, please stay safe, stay healthy, and let us know if you have any questions just by simply shooting an email to support@workamajig.com. All right. Thank you for your time today. Take care.